Welcome, everyone, to TYT Community, the only show paneled by fans and members of the Young Turks. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf, here tonight, breaking out the old-style mic and breaking out some excellent stories as well. I got a great panel with me tonight. We've got Jordan. Jordan's not here tonight. We've got Stephen, Sean, Julie, and Nick joining us tonight. Hey, guys, what's up?
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Good
Hi, guys.
The ceiling, the sky, and then space.
Okay, someone mute Sean right away.
Speaking of space, I wish I could shove you out an airlock some days. I'm just saying. Anyway, great stories, great show tonight. We're going to start out with a little bit of serious news. Breaking from yesterday, so not really breaking, but breaking for us, which is pretty damn good that we're only a day late on this, so bear with us. There's only so much I can do. That's, of course, President Obama, ISIS. Then we go back to the 1033 program. Who else got military equipment? It will surprise you, definitely. We've got some climate-friendly corporations we're going to put on blast. This Week in God, and then Fox News versus CNN's Karen Costello. That's an awesome story. And then we're going to go and do our second hour. We've got Stephen presenting an excellent story, so we're going to do that. So let's start us off with the first segment. We're going to go straight into ISIS. Now, President Obama made an important announcement recently regarding ISIS. Now let's take a look at that for right now.
If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven. We will increase our support to forces fighting these terrorists on the ground. Now, it will take time to eradicate a cancer like ISIL. And any time we take military action, there are risks involved, especially to the servicemen and women who carry out these missions. But I want the American people to understand how this effort will be different from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It will not involve American combat troops fighting on foreign soil. This counterterrorism campaign will be waged through a steady, relentless effort to take out ISIL wherever they exist using our air power and our support for partners' forces on the ground. This strategy of taking out terrorists who threaten us while supporting partners on the front lines is one that we have successfully pursued in Yemen and Somalia for years, and it is consistent with the approach I outlined earlier this year, to use force against anyone who threatens America's core interests, but to mobilize partners wherever possible to address broader challenges to international order.
So now we're launching an air campaign on ISIS in Syria. The same ISIS that was part of the rebel group against Assad that we wanted to arm earlier, especially if you're John McCain. Okay, so this is pretty complicated. But one thing that I think has to be pointed out is that President Obama pointed to the examples of Yemen and Somalia as a model of what to do. We're going to copy our successes in Yemen and Somalia. What's funny is he calls them successes, but they're continuing to, well, continue. We're still doing drone strikes and bombings in Somalia and Yemen. So, and it doesn't really seem to have slowed down Al-Qaeda or those Al-Qaeda offshoots, Al-Shabaab, and the other Al-Qaeda group in those countries. In fact, we've been doing this for about 13 years, and we're still using the George W. Bush authority to bomb these countries, and we don't really have a whole lot to show for it. Now, for me personally, I'm not really advocating troops or anything, but I'm just saying this action just seems to be a recipe for more endless war, as well as endless profits for the defense industry. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this situation. Sean, what do you think? Oh, I'm sorry, Nick.
Yeah, so I'm a little more open to the whole idea of American involvement than most. Again, part of me wants to look past the previous 10 years, which is part of the problem. We can't really, even though I want to. But last time I checked, this is part of a more international effort to get involved in stemming ISIS. This doesn't seem like it's going to be quite the same situation. It might be a weird hybrid of Libya and the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War. I guess that would be how I would imagine it. It might be something kind of like that. I don't know. It's really early and really hard to tell. So we'll see what happens, I guess.
I think that pragmatically, kind of the plan that they've laid out, just saying we're not going to send kind of tons of ground troops, we're just going to attack them from the skies, essentially. I can understand that, and that's probably the most pragmatic way of approaching it. But the problem is they've called it an open-ended conflict, and this is the reason why America gets into so many problems with, wars. Is that if they wanted to eradicate ISIL, if they really saw it as a genuine threat to kind of America's security, they could mobilize the entire American military and wipe them out within a week. And whilst I necessarily wouldn't advocate for that if they really were worried, that is what they could and should do. However, if you have an open-ended conflict where you're just going to keep on sending airstrikes and drone strikes, then that's just going to keep on rolling on. It's going to keep on funding the kind of military-industrial complex. So that's the real issue that I have. It seems that their plan is, okay, we'll destroy ISIL and we'll just attack them by airstrikes. But that's not a good enough plan for me. That's not as in-depth. And okay, they may have more in-depth plans that they're not telling the public. But just saying, it's going to be an open-ended conflict, that's simply not good enough. People want to know, what the end, how we can say mission accomplished, when will that point be, and just saying when ISIL is defeated, that's simply not good enough in my opinion.
Yeah, can I point out that Libya didn't work? We got Gaddafi, which, by the way, is a much easier job getting a leader to be ousted than destroying a fragmented group, but Libya is actually getting worse by the day. Egypt had to do secret airstrikes or airstrikes they didn't tell us about because the rebels aren't our friends, which seems like a pattern that we always run into. And 6 months ago, 8 months ago, we wanted to arm the Syrian rebels who are ISIS, and now we're going to destroy ISIS in Iraq and Syria, but we also have a policy that Assad has to go. And we also don't want to help Iran, who's also enemies with ISIS. It's a disaster, and it seems super awful that on the eve of September 11th, the Hope and Change president is using the authorization of military force that was passed in the wake of September 11th to extend our conflict to more parts of the world. And again, Somalia and Yemen aren't paradises now. We didn't solve everything. It's just I'm just surprised he didn't throw in Pakistan there, because those are all places where we bomb and we create more enemies. Our airstrikes piss people off, and they see that the West is interfering. People will join under the banner of ISIS.
I just want to quickly. Oh, sorry, Julie, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I kind of agree. I think we're causing more disruption than we need to be. Once again, the more we do this, the more we're creating hate amongst that region. There have been no telltale signs that they're actually going to attack on American soil, so to speak. And for this to continue being a problem just shows how poorly it was planned in the first place, back when Bush started the whole process.
Yeah, what's funny is that, Stephen, you were saying that this would be the most pragmatic choice. Under the circumstances, I guess it kind of is. It's the worst choice, because we have to choose between shit and crap. And it's essentially the same thing. Nick, go ahead. You have something to say?
Yeah.
Then Steve.
I mean, let's not forget as well is that ISIL at the moment isn't posing any threat to kind of the American nation. There may be some Americans who are in that area and they're under risk, so I can understand that. But people like John McCain is just saying kill them. You know, kind of they hate us because of our freedom, and that's completely nonsensical. If these terrorist groups wanted to attack a kind of a truly freedom-loving nation, they'd attack Sweden, they'd attack Norway or Denmark. Those are kind of really free countries and societies. America isn't the freest society by any stretch of the imagination, and so one of the reasons why they would want to attack you is because you're bombing them, and some people have made arguments that kind of America started this whole mess in the first place. Now I know that's childish to say, oh, you started it, but let's not forget as well is that if America starts using airstrikes and drone strikes, then there's probably going to end up being Iraqi civilian casualties, and then the families and friends of those casualties, they're going to start hating us, and then it's just going to kind of 30, 40 years down the line, there can potentially be another group. So I hope that preceding forces these airstrikes, that they're really careful and know exactly who they're bombing, and it's a difficult thing to do, I know that, but I really hope that they're paying attention and not just using these signature drone strikes where they're just bombing anyone who they think might be a terrorist.
And one more thing about them hating us, I don't think that ISIS hates us. I know for sure they don't hate John McCain or Lindsey Graham, because they're the ones who voted to put all those guns there that they're picking up. I mean, they should love America. All their artillery was left behind by us, and we gave it to the Iraqi military, which part of this plan is reconstituting that force, which is a disaster, and it isn't going to work. Like, we left them all those weapons, and now they're using them to take over. Like, if anything, we gave them foreign aid. So, I mean, they should love us.
And we don't forget, we also allowed for their creation by sowing the unrest in the Middle East by our bombing of Iraq and basically all of our interventionist foreign policy regarding the Middle East. We created ISIS. Congratulations, America. You built that.
Yeah, I'm going to say something slightly controversial. To an extent, I disagree with that. I mean, obviously, the policies of the administration definitely contributed to the creation of ISIS. But given how easily it fell apart without Saddam, how easily that fell apart, and how easy Libya fell apart without Gaddafi, I think these were inevitable outcomes anyway. I definitely think the American and Western involvement contributed and probably sped up the process for sure. But those two regions, from everything I've heard about Libya, it is by far just a bunch of different tribes and clans that share nothing with each other except a border and a faith, and that's for most of them that's not enough. They really don't like each other. In Iraq, it's much the same thing. You have Shiites, Sunnis, and Kurds all sharing one border, and they don't seem to really get along. This, I think, was going to happen eventually. What seems to be the case is that the strong men were going to die one way or the other, and it was going to fall apart. Because the lines, as Cengiz said, and I think he's absolutely right in saying it, were very arbitrarily drawn. The borders were very arbitrarily drawn. The regions decided were fairly arbitrarily, and it was going to fall apart eventually. The difference is now we bear some responsibility in claiming that we contributed to them falling apart, and we have some guilt to bear, so there's no denying that. But there's a point to where that was going to be inevitable, I think.
Yeah, but as I had said, a lot of the current state of affairs is now our fault, and we contributed. And even you said we contributed to this greatly. All right, one more. Sean, wrap us up.
Oh, I was gonna throw in the final point that this is caused by our intervention in Iraq. Nick is probably right, especially in Syria, where it was a revolution and like that just started up. Like ISIS would have existed anyway, or a group like ISIS would have existed anyway in other parts. But remember, we got rid of Gaddafi. And by we, I mean not me, the U.S. government got rid of Saddam. Like, we jump-started the process at a bare minimum. We tried to form a government, and it did not work. In Libya, we didn't even try to form a government. We just bounced out of there. Like, we can't we can't go around, to take a quote from somebody, I think it's John Adams, we can't go around the world looking for monsters to slay. There's unintended consequences to our actions.
All right. Well, we're gonna have to move on. Spent too much time on ISIS. We're gonna go to our next story here. Anybody notice that VT, Virginia Tech? It blows my mind ever looking at that. It just blows my mind. And so will this story. Now, we've touched on the militarization of the police forces, such as ones in Ferguson, and even in small towns such as Franklin, Indiana, which, by the way, only has a population of just over 2,000 people, but now sports an NRAP due to the Pentagon's 1033 program. Yes, an MRAP. But what you might not know is that it's not just regular police that are getting military equipment for free through this program, but it's also campus police. Yes, campus cops. Campus cops are getting MRAPs. Now, Vice did some reporting on this and found that many campus college police forces have successfully armed themselves with military-grade equipment. For example, Ohio State University in 2013 has its own mine-resistant vehicle. In 2012, UC Berkeley tried also to get the same kind of mine-resistant vehicle, but decided against it because of backlash. Why? Well, from who? Well, backlash from people who are asking why the hell a university needs a mine-resistant war vehicle. Guys, I know campus parties can get a little crazy, but geez, I don't think you need an MRAP to break one of those up. Now, one more thing. The 1033 program does do things like give out computers, office supplies, car parts, and other things that actually do make sense. But what this program sounds like it needs is some serious oversight and a change in what equipment should go where. If you don't really do that, then you end up with places like Ohio State getting one of these vehicles for doing God knows what. Sean, what do you think?
I mean, to be fair, Jeff, did you pull up the statistics of how many campus security guards were killed by improvised explosive devices planted in the middle of the road last year?
Yeah, it was about 0.
Zero? Yeah, that seems pretty accurate. Yeah, obviously there's no justification for the campus police to have this. Like, if there is a riot on the campus, call the actual police. Like, you are there for minor infractions. Like, the campus in my college, the campus police drove in golf carts. Like, they're basically golf carts. They took you from building to building. It's not a huge deal. There's no improvised explosive devices. There's no need for you to be super heavily armed. It's ridiculous, and it's part of this stupid program in Homeland Security where they give you grants to buy stuff from them, which makes no sense unless we're living in a world where weapons contractors can bribe the government officials to set up a system like this. Like, we are selling our weapons of war to any person who basically asks for it, as long as they're wearing a fancy uniform. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. There's no need for it. And it should make everybody uncomfortable, especially college-age people or even college students on the panel. Like this guy. It makes me uncomfortable to see this at the campus.
And what's next? Mall cops?
I gotta jump in. Sean, I don't know if you were kidding when you said golf carts, because if that were true, I'd be very surprised, because admittedly I live in a town city that has can count roughly 10% of its population to be attributed to the university. It's a very, very large university, one of the largest in Canada, and it has its own police force, and they have full-fledged cop cars. They don't have, I don't think they're allowed weapons, and guns, but I think they have mace and batons and maybe a taser. But yeah, the idea of campus police having one of these is an MRAP is insanity. I can't even fathom that. Some people don't even think they should really have the cop cars that they have, thinking they're not all real cops. I don't know. I don't care about that. Although, to be absolutely fair, being a TA, or being was a TA last year, you don't want to know how scary students can get when you tell them they're not doing good in their course. Whoo.
Julie, what do you think?
You might need the MRAP then.
Well, it's not only the colleges that are being armed. There are actually 10 different school districts that we're talking elementary, high school districts in Texas that are getting these type of weapons. Why in the hell do these schools need this? How are they going to prevent school shootings when they're perpetuating violence by adding to it with this type of armory?
I mean, for me, I think one of Sean's first points is right, is that if there is a riot on site, I mean, universities, kids can get raucous, they can have some protests that then get out of control. If that happens, yeah, you call the police, and then the police still shouldn't have access to these MRAP vehicles. It's ridiculous. I mean, I've been to 3 universities in my time, and the security at university, when you have kind of university security, at most they'll have a key card that lets you into buildings late at night. That's all the security at UK universities is there for. They don't even have batons or tasers. If there's a problem, then you call the, well, supposedly trained professionals. In America, that's not necessarily the case with some police forces, as we've seen. But you call the police if there's an actual kind of violent problem. It's absolute madness that any police force is allowed to have an MRAP, let alone just school cops. I mean, next they're going to have more cops, you know, kind of more security that are going to be allowed to walk around with grenade launchers and M16 rifles. It's absolute insanity, and this program should be stopped immediately. But if a bill came up in kind of the House or in the Senate saying, oh, let's scrap the 1033 bill, it would be voted down immediately. And that's one of the most depressing things as well, because everyone knows there's, you know, trying to pass a bill that would get rid of that program, it wouldn't stand a chance of succeeding.
And I just want to add one more point. And first of all, I was totally serious about my old school with the golf carts. But I want to add one more serious point. Like, colleges have serious problems with, like, sexual assault on campus, underreporting, like them not prosecuting offenders or turning offenders over to the actual police. And somehow that translates to waste a bunch of money on basically military-style armored vehicles. Like, this helps in no way. If they decided to get, like, an actual forensic crew, like, as weird as that would be to be on a college campus, that would make more sense than military equipment. Like, who's planting mines on campus? Find me 3 cases and you can have it. 3 cases in the last 10 years and you can have it.
Well, Sean, obviously it's ISIS that came over the border from Mexico and now is planting landmines in our colleges. Of course. Seriously, no, this is insane. Absolutely insane. There's no reason we need an MRAP in school. There's just no reason for it.
Although, if any of the cops have class, it's a great way to make an entrance.
All right, moving on to our next story, unless anybody else has any serious points to make. Going once. All right. So how many of the so-called climate-friendly corporations have given money to climate deniers? Well, you might be thinking, none, Jeff. That's a dumb question, right? If they're climate-friendly, they're obviously not bankrolling climate deniers. That's mental. Well, it's not as dumb as you might think, because 2 groups, Forecast the Facts and The Sum of Us, took a look at campaign disclosure filings compiled by the Center for Responsive Politics, and they found that many of these so-called climate-friendly companies are, of course, bankrolling the Climate Denier Caucus that's helping to send climate deniers to political office. So who are the worst offenders? The ones who pay lip service to fighting climate change but don't actually do anything. Well, I'm going to give you a list that's ranked in the order of amount of funding that they send to politicians that are opposing any action to curb climate change. 1 is UPS. Number 2 is Microsoft. 3 is the Ford Motor Company, which makes a little bit of sense. Also, UPS makes a little bit of sense as well. Google, and the 5th, with the lowest, is eBay. Now already, do some of those people on that list surprise you at all, guys?
Not particularly, to be honest. I mean, I'd imagine that there would have been some oil companies that probably give a bit more, because, you know, think companies like BP, they say, oh yeah, we're in favour of not necessarily green energy, but kind of more, I don't know, like bioethanol type fuels and all of that. So I would have maybe thought that they would have given a bit more money, but maybe in the study they weren't technically classed as green promoting companies. But yeah, with the other 5, I'm not too surprised, just simply because they're the companies with the most money in America.
To your point, the only one that surprises me on that list is Microsoft, because eBay, Google, because Google's trying to compete with Amazon, all rely on UPS and those type of shipping companies. Ford makes sense. Microsoft doesn't really make that much sense.
You're right, it doesn't. Microsoft doesn't. Julie, Nick? Surprise you at all?
Not particularly. Google definitely doesn't. And neither does Microsoft, come to think of it too. Because when you look at what they're in the business of, Google has, it's more than just the search engine now, it's also things like phones, and Microsoft, same thing in computers. A lot of that stuff requires things like rare earth metals, which kind of require some mining, and arguably has some environmental impacts, and probably does contribute to global warming. So if the resources you're getting might possibly contribute to that, say, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Sean's shaking his head, so I'll let him chime in. He's probably going to tell me or prove me wrong.
I'm shaking my head on Microsoft because Google, like, they have Google Shop. There's a whole bunch of things in Google. But Microsoft, most of what they make is like software and hardware and stuff like that. I'm sure phones and all that. All that comes from plastics. If we stopped burning oil and made more of it into plastic, it would make their products cheaper, and like they would make more money. Like, so like Microsoft weirds me out of all of them.
Yeah, but the filaments in the microchips, the gold used as conductors in metals, that makes it a little more. That's where I was going with that. That was my thinking, was because they do have to mine for that stuff. So maybe that would be why they'd be on that list. I mean, because when you're putting out millions of computers a year, you do need a fair bit of rare earth metals. So that's my thought, at least.
All right, Julie.
I was just I'm agreeing with Nick. It is they are putting out a lot of resources, or bringing in a lot of resources that are negating the environmental impacts that they could be doing, or they could be making things a little bit greener, and trying to find things other than these precious metals, etc., to make these chips with. So.
All right. So I have some more notable findings from this study, from these filings, and that would be Chevron gave actually a lot less than UPS. They gave about $1,200,000. ExxonMobil, no surprise, gave about $2 million to anti-science candidates. But something that did surprise me from this, which I'm surprised that they're not considered one of the worst offenders because they gave the most amount of money, is AT&T. They give about over or just under $3.3 million. AT&T, a telecommunications company. So that's a little strange to me. Now, like I said, unlike Chevron, ExxonMobil, First Energy, these people on the list, a lot of these companies, like I said, they're not involved directly in energy. So I tend to think that it's more of on the taxes and regulation side of this. I think climate denial and pro-business policies tend to go hand in hand with a lot of these climate-denying politicians. And of course, there are pro-business Democrats, and I'm sure they get a ton of money from these companies too. But I think it's really hypocritical for you to say that you support, fighting efforts to fight climate change when you fund Ted Cruz. For example, Google gave Ted Cruz $12,500 in campaign contributions. And look, let's be completely honest. It might not be even from these companies directly. It could be through ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. And to Microsoft's credit, they dropped ALEC this year. The rest of the worst offenders on this list, however, that still give lip service, they're still part of ALEC. So maybe that's where a lot of that funding actually comes through. They just give it to ALEC, and ALEC gives it to these climate-denying politicians.
The thing is, I don't actually have as big a problem as a liberal should have with this, because a number of weeks ago we did a story about Facebook giving donations to an anti-LBGT kind of state legislator or something, and we're seeing kind of Facebook is always promoting kind of positive about gay rights, but they gave it to someone who's anti-gay. And in these cases, all of these companies, they're all saying, oh, we're pro-environment, we all want green stuff, and yet they're giving it to these climate change deniers. Well, the thing is, they're probably giving this money to the climate change deniers and kind of those candidates, not because they're climate change denier candidates, but probably because they promote, I don't know, net neutrality for Google's case, or maybe they're promoting some other business cause, and it just so happens that they're climate change deniers as well. And whilst that's a bit of a pain for these companies like Google and AT&T, they care more about another policy that the candidate is going to vote in favor of than for the climate change. And so at the end of the day, they're amoral. They don't particularly care. They're just looking for the best outcome for their business. And if climate change has to take a back seat when it comes to a certain politician, then they're still willing to give money to that politician. So I don't think it's as bad. They're not actively giving it to climate change deniers. It just happens that these candidates are climate change deniers.
Well, Stephen, let me push back just a tiny bit on that. You use the discussion, the anti-LGBT candidate, and like, okay, they have a better. I see your point. Remember, I kind of agreed with your point that, okay, there's bigger fish to fry, right? And so, okay, net neutrality is a worthy cause. The problem is with climate change, that is a major issue. I'm sorry to say this to my LGBT friends, is that the climate is much more important at this point because we're pretty much dooming our civilization to fucking oblivion. So your argument, Stephen, sort of falls flat just because of the scope of what it actually is. It is a bigger deal. It is something to get mad about because climate change is ultimately going to wreck us, and it's also going to wreck businesses. I mean, you see all these insurance companies that are saying, look, we're not going to be able to pay out all the expected damage from all this climate change. We've got to start preparing ourselves. So that's sort of why I had to push back on your argument.
I do agree, but again, all of these kind of corporations and companies are amoral, and also, as well as being amoral, they're short-sighted. They only see 10, 20 years down the line in terms of profits anyway. And climate change, okay, yes, it is impacting them some bit now, but it's not going to have a huge impact. And so I get your point that, yes, climate change is a bigger thing to worry about, but these companies, they're not... the company itself doesn't actually care about climate change. The people within the companies do, but the company itself, it doesn't really matter to it.
Right. All right, Sean, why don't you get the last word?
Yeah, there's going to be missing from this list, and we've discovered it in previous news stories, and that's News Corp, because every studio owned by Rupert Murdoch is a carbon neutral studio except for Fox News, and they're actually the first company, Fox, to get all their studios to do that. So Rupert Murdoch pays a lot of lip service to climate change in everywhere else in the world except on his news network here in the United States. So they're also on the list of huge hypocrites.
What do you expect from News Corp? I don't expect a whole lot, especially when you see the positions a lot of people take on the News Corp owned and operated stations.
But still, as a company, they are the best in terms of carbon neutrality. Every studio except for the Fox News studio.
I'm not sure, but I thought that we debunked that last time that point was brought up. I can't remember. Well, either way. But anyway, does anyone have anything else to add, or should we go on to the next story? That is a no. Congratulations, Stephen. We went with your suggestion. What about THOR? A Washington City Council member by the name of John Trumbo has some rather funny ideas about how to start their city council meetings. He brought a proposal recently saying that all meetings should be forced to begin with a prayer to whom he says is, quote, directed in name and reference to the same God addressed in the Founding Fathers' signatory documents that established this nation. Oh, really? Now, according to Raw Story, when a fellow councilman asked him to define what God, or I should say that God, more specifically, he, of course, referenced none other than the Judeo-Christian God, of course. Quote, anyone who looks at the nation's capital with its depictions of Christian religious scenes and biblical inscriptions would understand why the Founding Fathers would demand the Christian God be prayed to at all city council meetings. Yes, demand. Forget about that whole separation of church and state thing. It doesn't exist in where this guy is at. Now, where is this coming from? Well, there's a recent Scots decision, Greece versus Galloway, that he's using as quote-unquote proof that the Founding Fathers wanted Christian-only prayers to open meetings. Now, already, I gotta ask, isn't that just ridiculous? I mean, look, this is a crazy, insane discussion to even be having, especially as most constitutional scholars say that, yes, a prayer is fine in a city council meeting as long as you don't discriminate against other denominations by, allowing them to use their own opening prayers, which this guy is obviously saying, no, you can't do that. It's only my God allowed. Only my God. So what we need is somebody to come and say, well, no, that's not right. What about THOR? Nick?
I'd actually like to ask Julie what she thinks of this first, and I'll offer my commentary after.
Okay. Personally, I think it's ridiculous. The fact that he is wanting a specific goal to be prayed to is absolutely outrageous with the separation of church and state. And our Founding Fathers were not necessarily Judeo-Christian in their beliefs. They believed in, many of them believed in higher powers, but not necessarily the one God that that Christians believe in today. Not to mention the fact that religion at that time was a lot different than it is today. We have a very big focus on the Bible being one of these things that we believe in 100% of the time, if you're a Christian. However, back then it was seen more as a tool to develop your thoughts and ideas with, not as a 100% this is real type of thing. So.
Okay. Go ahead, Nick.
Julie answered that quite well. My thought is just, how could you possibly enforce this? On what universe does this guy think this is even remotely enforceable? You think you can read the people's minds and go, oh, he's not praying to the right God. He says it's God, but he means Yahweh, the Jewish one. He's not praying to the Christian version. Oh, get him out of here. Or they're gonna go, he said God, but he's speaking in Arabic, therefore Muslim, therefore out of the meeting. No, they can't fucking do that. So it's not only is it unconstitutional, it's really stupid and has no possible reinforcing basis. You can't possibly do that because you can't read people's minds to find out if they're praying to the right fucking God.
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, Julia was right in saying, if you ask any reputable historian, they'll tell you that the founding fathers were, at most deist. They didn't believe in kind of an intervening Judeo-Christian God. So him thinking that is absolute nonsense. He doesn't even know the history of his own country. But secondly, if you go to any kind of radical kind of Islamic preacher, the members of ISIL and such, they say kind of you must pray to our God, kind of our God is the only God, and they dictate that you have to pray to this particular one, and that's essentially in essence what this guy is trying to do, saying you must pray to my God, no other God is kind of worthy apart from my God. It's just as bad in terms of like mindset and enforcing and imposing your religion on someone else, and of course that's completely contradictory to the entire the whole basis of the founding of America, that you all have the freedom to believe or not believe in any religion, to pray to whatever God, whether it's Set or Isis is probably the best God to pray to, but that is an Egyptian God, or Thor. It's absolute nonsense. This guy's a fool, and how he's in a position of power, I do not know.
John?
Okay, so like we all like you guys have all stated the obvious points. First Amendment. Not all the founding fathers were Christian. Thomas Jefferson was a deist. He ripped out sections of the Bible that he disagreed with. Thomas Paine was an obvious atheist. Benjamin Franklin was a pretty obvious atheist, although some people contest it, even though I don't buy into that. Like, you have a mixture of different faiths and non-faiths in the founding fathers. So like the idea that they would want a specific Christian prayer is ridiculous. But to answer the question posed by Jeff in his graphic, there's no reason why we should not pray to Thor. I mean, he saved New York City. That's where I live, from the Chitauri invasion, or at least he helped. What has Jesus done lately? Turn some water into wine? Come on, you know who's better. Drop the hammer, get it, Thor, hammer, and let's...
More importantly, I don't see any ice giants.
Oh, and on top of that, he saved London in his own movies. So Steven's on board. Drop the hammer. Thor's our god, official for the country.
Well, I guess Canada's just doomed to become a wasteland. No one wants to save Canada yet. Or we've just never been threatened. Probably the latter. But good on you guys for getting protection from gods. Good for you. About time something good happened for you.
Indeed. All right. Move on, huh? Not much to that story. There's a lot in this one. Good old Frothy. It's good to see he's back. No, not really. Rick Santorum, yes, Rick Santorum is back with an idea on how to get secularism out of the classroom. Now, what idea, what did he come up with? Well, he was talking to Brian Fisher, and he had a little conversation on Brian Fisher's show, Focal Point. Let's take a look at that.
We have not fought in the public square for freedom of for our religious values to be allowed out there, just like theirs are. And it's really interesting, Brian. I'm sure you've talked about this. The idea that if you take religion out of the public square, if you take the Bible out of the classroom, that's neutral. Well, no, it's not neutral. It's a different worldview. You can call it. I think we should start calling secularism a religion, because if we did, then we could ban that too, because that's what they've done. They've hidden behind the fact that the absence of religion is not a religion of itself, which in fact it is, because it has certain moral values and certain teachings that look like a religious a type of moral worldview. So what we have to start doing as Christians is reassert ourselves and saying, you know what, the freedom of religion is not the freedom from religion. We should be in the public square. We should be taught in the schools. It should be an open marketplace of ideas instead of throttling one particular perspective under the name of being offensive to some people.
It should be an open marketplace of ideas. Yeah, we have that. It's called being able to have churches. Any church you want. You should look into it. And look, his points, secularism is a religion. No, it's not. What the fuck? And another thing, freedom of religion isn't freedom from religion. Yeah, actually it is. At least that's part of it. If you want it to be, you are free here in America to have your own religion. And in America also to have that religion tax exempt, as his is. You're also free to not have a religion, to not practice a religion. The idea that Christians need to reassert themselves is patently ridiculous. We live in a country where many places open atheists can't serve in Congress, where kids can be expelled for refusing to say under God during the Pledge of Allegiance, where atheists are actually the most distrusted group. Yes, distrusted group. Look it up. It's a new Pew poll that came out recently. And where the idea of even having an atheist president is a huge negative in the polls. So Rick Santorum, why don't you tell me again how a Christian majority is somehow being oppressed by a godless minority? I wait for your answer, but I doubt you're going to have anything substantive because you are full of shit. Stephen?
Look, I mean, when you're in a conversation with Brian Fisher and you're the stupidest person in the conversation, then you really know that you're scraping the bottom of the intellectual barrel. I mean, it's incredible. He obviously, it's painfully clear for everyone that he's a stupid, stupid man. He doesn't even understand the term that he's using, secularism. As you pointed out, secularism, the very definition of it is the principle, that you have a separation between the government and religion, and that those two shouldn't intertwine, and therefore you shouldn't have it in public schools. And him saying that, kind of, as Christians, we need to reassert ourselves, become kind of timid, and we're being persecuted all the time. You try being kind of a Muslim in America, and getting your prayer rug out in the park. You kind of leave for lunch at work, and you want to kind of do one of your 5 prayers a day. You try being an atheist. These kind of minority groups are persecuted every day, and yet it's just a victim mentality. He doesn't have any idea about what he's talking about, and the very thought that he could be president, he's probably going to end up running again, is a really, really scary thought. He would turn, if he was elected into office, and let's face it, he won't be, but if he did get into office, he would try to turn America into a theocracy. And then just a final point that's neither here nor there, but I'm sure he's dyeing his hair. I really do think that he should be graying by now.
That's very, very substantive point. Yeah, Santorum is Rick Santorum. He's obviously a moron. But to his point, nobody is banning Christians from being in the public square. Like, you want to pray in a park, that's fine. You want your kid to wear rosary beads to a public school, that's totally fine. All the law is saying, and the Constitution is saying, is that official government people can't promote your religion as a part of their official government job. That includes teachers at a public school. Like, that's basically all anybody here is arguing for. Like, if a kid wants to bring a Bible to public school every single day, then that's totally fine with everybody on this panel, I assume. Nobody is saying Christians are completely excluded from anything or excluded from anything. We're just saying that the government shouldn't promote one particular religion. And if they did promote a particular religion, it should be the Viking religion, because that has Thor in it, and he saved New York, and he has a hammer, and they have Viking funerals where they shoot the arrow on you and they catch you on fire, and it's awesome.
Fun fact. Thursday actually used to be called Thor's Day. Fun fact. We do all of our shows on Thor's Day. Coincidence?
Thor.
Hold on, guys. I have to go do a blot and sacrifice some of my prisoners. This won't take long. Maybe I'll do a blood eagle. It's okay. No. Steven knows what I'm talking about, blood eagle stuff. I'm not even entirely convinced Rick Santorum's that stupid. I'm convinced he's just a very bad liar. Part of me is wondering if he's trying to pull the same sort of two-faced shit that people like Romney were trying to pull during the last election. I think he's just really bad at it, too. I mean, there's he's much more consistent in his overall terrible message that he might just be that dumb, but it's not. But what I actually wanted to get into was his comment about the marketplace of ideas. Okay, Rick, let's talk about the marketplace of ideas. In the marketplace of ideas, when your idea is bad, people can say your idea is bad. So guess what? Your idea is bad and you should feel bad. And if there was religion in the school, which there already fucking is, it has every right to be challenged, sir, because that's what you can do in a free society. Don't like it? Move to North Korea. I'm sure they'll be accommodating for you.
And let's not forget as well, it's a famous quote, and whilst he probably wants religion taught in schools all the way up to the age of 16 and beyond, there's a famous quote that says, "Give me the boy till he's 7, I'll give you the man for life." He would love to be able to teach, especially young kids when they're impressionable, to believe in the Christian ideology and only the Christian ideology, so that they will probably end up being Christians for the rest of your life. He wants to indoctrinate people into his own worldview, and that's just inherently, I don't use the word evil because I think that's too strong a word, but it's nasty and it's cynical, and he just shouldn't be, no one should be allowed to do it with any religion. The only reason that religion should be taught in schools is to say, look, people have this worldview and other people believe this worldview. You can make up your own mind. But to only teach one religion is just insanity. He would get on well with a lot of extremist kind of Islamic preachers thinking that kind of their God is the only God that should be taught in schools. He's an idiot.
Julie?
Yeah, one thing, it really irritates me about this subject because there is so much religion taught in our schools today. I have a girlfriend that recently posted to Facebook, and she was wanting to know about the church trailer that comes to the school, and the kids go out to the trailer and they learn about Jesus and God and whatever religious faction they're promoting at the time, Christian religion, and there should not be anything like that. There should not be a discussion about this. You should not have to post to Facebook saying, should I let my kids go do this or should I not? It shouldn't be there in the first place.
Agree.
I actually might disagree, and I'm going to ask you to explain a little more so I can get the context, but if it's like private, like church just pulling up on a public sidewalk and saying, hey, we want to teach you about this, and it's not a part of the school, I actually think that's perfectly fine.
But it's during school hours.
It's during school hours? Like they go during, like it's available during recess?
No, like it's available as a class, but they go out and the other kids do a study hall.
Okay, if it's like a class in a public school, then I totally agree. But if it's like some like religious people parking and they just want to like preach to kids, like that sucks. But it's a public sidewalk, and I would be in favor of that, or not in favor of it, but I would support their right to do that. Especially only in favor of it if it was about THOR.
I've had children age, so I know this is something that is very common in America. We do have throughout every school district in America, you're going to find something similar to this. Or most school districts in America, you're going to find these religious groups, these Christians that go to the schools and they offer a separate class, so to speak, to teach Christianity. They don't teach Islam. They don't teach Buddhism. They teach Christianity. That's the only thing they teach. There is no other alternative. If there were alternatives that the kids could go choose which one they wanted, or if everything was spread out over a variety of things, that would be one thing. But just to have Christian teaching during school hours and only provided to students that are given permission, quote unquote, to do it, is asinine. It's absolutely against what we should be standing for.
Well, I still might not have too much of a problem with it if it was 100% objective. If you think about it, the biggest driver of people becoming atheists or becoming skeptical of the Bible is actually reading it in context. And so if they allowed that, but obviously we know that that's not the intent. The intent is to indoctrinate,
right? And
to a certain religious point of view. So,
and in the context that Julie explained, I would disagree with that too, because you're letting them out during school hours. It's weird. But like I said, if it was a random truck, like and they go during recess or break or whatever after school and they're just parked there, to me you have a right to park near a public school and do whatever you want as long as, within legal reason.
Thanks for making that clarification, Sean, because I was about to say, some random truck pulls up near a school. They're allowed to do whatever they want there. Oh, okay, Sean. Okay there.
That's a little creepy.
Clarification.
Context. It matters.
Very, very creepy, Sean.
And, okay, so we'll go to our final story of the first hour, which should be a lot of fun here. I'm not sure if this is, well, it's definitely a Fox fail. We'll give it that. It has to do with Ray Rice. Following the story of Ray Rice has been sort of interesting. Not so much in what he did, but the reactions to it by different figures on the media. Most, of course, condemning the obvious case of domestic violence caught on tape. For example, Keith Olbermann, who not only took down Rice's, quote, brutal assault of his then fiancée on February 15th, but then called for Roger Goodell's resignation over the deception or incompetence of him, the NFL, the entire Baltimore Ravens organization, for misleading the public, damaging the efforts of every man and woman in this country seeking to merely slow down the murderous epidemic of domestic violence and making a mockery of the process by which those who batter those they claim they love are to be brought to justice. Speaking of mockery, we now go to Fox and Friends. While talking about the entire Ray Rice situation, they had this fun little discourse.
Let's talk about this. Ray Rice of the Ravens. You saw some video from the Ravel Hotel in Atlantic City back in February. You saw that where he was dragging his knocked out then girlfriend, now wife, out of the car. Well, now TMZ shows us what happened inside, and it is shocking. Here they're walking in, and then we cut to the inside camera.
And see, what happened after that is, after review, the NFL came out and suspended him for 2 games. He apologized profusely with his wife in a couple of press conferences. Then Roger Goodell, the commissioner, came out and said, I made a huge mistake. It's got to be more severe. It's the wrong message. It's going to be 6 weeks one time, and then a ban for life if you do it again.
It's so unfortunate, too, for the game of football in general that it puts such a black eye on the sport when it's such a great American pastime.
We should also point out, after that video, now you know what happened in there, she still married him. They're currently married.
I mean, look, Rihanna went back to
Chris Brown.
Yeah, Chris Brown right after. A lot of people thought that was a terrible message.
And then there's Jay-Z and Beyonce and Solange. That was also in an elevator.
But JV didn't hit back.
There was some craziness
I think the messages take the stairs.
The message is, when you're in an elevator, there's a camera.
Yeah.
Put a black eye on the sport of football. Oh, God, it hurts. Oh. Now, one CNN host saw this and had her own opinion about Fox and Friends commentary. Let's go to that.
Even after the NFL gave Rice the heave-ho, some of the commentary was aimed squarely at his wife. When I watched that segment, I wanted to throw up, and so did millions of others online. At least my friends at Fox apologized, sort of.
Comments that we made during this story yesterday made some feel like we were taking the situation too lightly. We are not. We were not. Domestic abuse is a very serious issue to us, I can assure you.
It's a very serious issue. That's why we made terrible puns. Come on, guys. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean...
Stephen first.
Sorry. I think it was a rather piss-poor apology. It's just like, okay, yeah, we did something wrong, but let's move on. But I mean, today on, I think it was Sean Hannity's show, he had a guest on who was saying it was kind of the wife's fault for hitting her head on the bar, sort of thing. You know, she was the reason that she managed to knock herself out. It's just an entire mindset of the people at Fox News that just don't want to even acknowledge this sort of problem. And even if they do acknowledge it, they say, oh, well, it's kind of her problem, it's kind of his problem. I mean, my whole stance on this situation is that Ray Rice, he should have just been sent, he should have been arrested, he should have been sent to prison, just given the normal jail time that somebody would have received for that sort of act. Then he should have had to come out, kind of do a hell of a lot of charity work, give a lot of money to kind of domestic abuse charities, and then he could be rehabilitated and come back in. But the fact that this has been dragged on and dealt with so poorly, and don't get me wrong, I don't have any sympathy for the guy who beats up women, but now, because it hasn't been dealt with properly, this is going to haunt him for the rest of his life. And whilst it should do in some extent, it's kind of ruined his life. Whereas if he had gone to prison, done his time, had the right punishment, then he might have been able to make some sort of, you know, career comeback, not necessarily in the NFL, but at least be able to work properly. But now his entire life has been ruined. And whilst I get a lot of people say, yes, good, that's fine, but I just think that this has been dealt with so poorly on every single angle, and especially by Fox News, because it's just simply something you don't joke about. Admittedly, if a comedian, if, you know, Louis C.K. had made some, I mean, Louis C.K. wouldn't make that sort of joke, but if any comedian had made that sort of joke on stage in a comedy theatre, I'd probably give them slack, but they're a comedian. These are supposed to be news hosts and journalists. You shouldn't be joking about any real subject unless you're doing a story about a cat stuck up a tree, you know, that sort of thing. But on something as serious as domestic abuse, as a news anchor, you just don't joke about it. And I hope that Fox has learnt a lesson, but I doubt it.
I'm going to say something potentially awful. I'm going to say...
Oh, do it.
The joking was not the worst part for me. I didn't mind that as much. If they had just done the jokes, I would have been like, a little cringeworthy, but there's worse. What bothered me was the fact that they're like, and she still married him, and they bringing up these other examples. That's what got to me. That's what was like, so fucking what? Don't just shut up. Who cares if she still married him? That doesn't change what happened here. It's terrible. You don't go on to say that. That, to me, sounded like it was like, oh, guess it wasn't a big deal. Not that more so than the joking was what I thought was dismissing the seriousness of the situation. But then again, I don't know. I have one perspective on it, and I'm definitely open to being wrong. So,
Julie.
Yeah, I could go on about this all night, but I won't. I was in an abusive relationship, so I know how very difficult it is to get out of these. The fact that they said, oh, and she went ahead and married him. Oh, yeah, that's great. Do they realize the few women that can actually get out of abusive relationships? It's like, I don't know the exact statistics, but it's 85% of women who are abused in a relationship do not ever get out of that relationship, or they go into another one where it is abusive. The cycle has to be put to an end, and for them to be saying, oh, it's okay, she married him, bullshit. That's fucking wrong. These people who are in these situations need support. They need help. They don't need to be told, oh, well, it's okay. They don't need people on TV, especially newscasters, joking about the situation. That's sad, it's rude, it's immoral, in my opinion. And I'll shut up there.
It's 1 in 4. I believe there was a statistic they were showing on CNN. It was 1 in 4 women under a certain age end up in abusive relationships. That's horrible.
It's very high. It's very high from what I've seen. It's incredibly high.
Yeah.
I wanna. What happened?
That I may be wrong on that statistic. So if you have some information, please correct me.
Oh yeah, I wanted to jump in on this story. Yeah, it's very hard to get out of the relationships. Like, to get to the crux of what Kilme said, I actually thought the take the stairs thing was funny. You're on a morning show. You're like, all the stories are supposed to be light. I know that's a serious story, but it was like a quick line that he thought of, and like the look on his face after he said it was funny. The more unfortunate part about that segment I'm going to kind of agree with Nick, but for a different reason, is because they had 3 people on there, and they had all the makings of 2 really good points, but they didn't have a brain between them to put it together. Like, they were going on about how she got back together with him and how Rihanna got back with Chris Brown. And there you can get into the point about how domestic violence is a cycle and how statistically it's very hard to get out of these relationships. And it usually takes dramatic intervention for somebody to get out. Like, it's like you had a almost substantive point there, but they just missed it because it's Fox. And the other thing that was super disappointing is the second point that they would have had. And that was the Jay-Z point. Jay-Z, who is not a professional athlete, he's not built like Ray Rice, was in a situation where he was being quote-unquote provoked by a woman, and he got out of that situation without throwing a punch. So you had 2 solid points that just slipped right through their fingers. That's actually the saddest part about that segment, is that they're just so dumb. Like, you have like a news organization with statistics guys and all this stuff, teleprompters, pre-show meetings, and you can't get the 2 solid smart points out, and you could touch the surface of them.
Instead, your point is, well, obviously elevators have cameras, so you shouldn't beat your girlfriend in the elevator.
And the elevators have cameras is a way worse message than take the stairs. Like, that one is, oh, do something wrong somewhere else. Like, that is a way worse message than this take the stairs joke.
Yeah, that's essentially what I was pointing at is, well, obviously, if you're going to do something wrong, don't do it in an elevator. Yes, I don't discount the fact that he was probably, that it was a joke, right? This is a very poor joke, in a very poorly timed joke, and also it just wasn't funny. Like, you could make a good point about Louis C.K. doing a joke, that could be offensive, but a lot of comedy does have some truth in it, and sometimes the truth hurts, and it's also funny at the same time. This is not one of those cases. Anyone have any final thoughts to add on this story? All right. That does it for the first hour here on TYT Community. Let me switch over to my magical second hour setup. Wow, it's like magic, man. It just changes like that. I don't know what that whole thing's about. Anyway, well, I wouldn't know about it if I had a producer. So we're going to go over to the second hour format, which is a little bit more looser. It's a little bit more loose than the first hour. We're going to go to a discussion panel format led by our panelists. Up today with our first story, Stephen. Stephen, you're going to talk a little bit about Scottish independence and something that's not reported as much. I'm sorry I don't have the clip for that, by the way. So
it's fine. No, I mean, this is kind of a case where I think that TYT needs to have a European or UK-based headquarters because, Cenk covered it on the Young Turks the other day, and he did an okay job of it, but I just felt that I had to talk about it a bit more. And whilst I'm not an expert on British politics, I think that Cenk just doesn't know enough to give enough clout to the whole Scottish independence story. So anyway, about, England and Scotland has been in a relationship for about 300 years, and Scotland has decided to want out of this relationship. So they're being umming and ahhing about when to have an independence vote, and they've decided that they're going to have it on the 18th of September this year. Currently, the polling is exceptionally close. For a long time, months ago, the No campaign to keep England and Scotland, or the UK, together, the No campaign was quite a number of percentage points in the lead, whereas 3 days ago, the Yes campaign had a 2-point lead, whereas currently No is at 52% and Yes is at 48%, but it's changing almost daily, and it depends on the polling organisation and so on. But either way, it's really close. Currently, the situation for this referendum on independence, anyone who lives in Scotland, so an Englishman living in Scotland or a Scottish person living in Scotland, is able to vote on independence, and it's from those of the age of 16 and above. So it's not 18, you have 16-year-olds voting. And whilst there are some positives to that, I personally feel that's a really horrible mistake to make, because I certainly know that when I was 16, and I'm sure most people agree that when they were 16 they had absolutely no clue about politics and probably shouldn't have been having that much of a say in the matter, but that's the current situation. 16-year-olds and above are allowed to vote. So currently the two parties here, you have the Scottish National Party, the SNP, who are obviously voting for the Yes campaign and want Scotland to become independent, and then you have what is become known as Team Westminster, which is the Liberal Democrats, Labour and the Conservative Party, who are predominantly based down in England, who want to keep the union together. Jenks said yesterday on the show that kind of Labour, they do have a number of seats in Scotland. It's about 42 seats that they have, that if Scotland became independent they would lose. And he said that might be a bad thing because, you know, the Labour Party here in the UK is progressive. That, I feel, is an incorrect point. Whilst it's probably more progressive than the Conservative Party, it may not be as progressive as the Liberal Party when it comes to certain issues. And I think using the word progressive in a UK context is very, very different to how you'd use progressive in American political context. So I just hope that people understand that an English progressive and an American progressive are very different things. Here in the UK, the three main parties, Conservative, Lib Dem and Labour, they are all very similar on many different issues, unlike the polarised nation of the two-party system in America. So currently the situation is that if Scotland voted yes, there's a number of things that they would gain, and there's a number of things that they would lose. First of all, well, they wouldn't necessarily gain, but they would keep the Queen as the head of state, so the Queen doesn't necessarily have to worry about losing her property in Balmoral. You can keep her castle there, that's fine. Scotland's happy to keep with the royal family. One issue that's to be decided is the amount of share of the UK debt that they would have. That's something that kind of the percentage amount that they would be allocated to deal with isn't going to be decided until a couple of weeks after they voted yes, if they vote yes. Another issue that they have to deal with is what currency they will use. Currently, Alex Salmond, who's head of the Scottish National Party, is saying, yeah, we can use the British pound, that's perfectly fine. There's some issues with that. It's most likely the case that they do vote yes, they will continue to use the British pound because they wouldn't be able to use the euro or any other real form of currency. But it's an issue that Alex Salmond hasn't properly dealt with, but he just thinks that he can push forward and use the English pound. Problem with that is that it does leave some problems with Scottish pensions and how they will fall if Scotland does move to a slightly different currency. If they start using kind of Scottish pounds rather than British pounds, then that could really mess up a lot of the kind of national pensions. People's pensions could potentially drop, and so a lot of people are a bit wary of that. Other economic problems as well is that Scotland will then be removed from the European Union. It won't have certain, it will have different trade agreements, and it will have to re-enter the European Union and reapply, and that could take many years, and that would be a real problem certainly for businesses within Scotland. Already a number of the banks, so the Royal Bank of Scotland, RBS, and Lloyds Banking Group, they've said that they've drawn up kind of emergency plans to move some of their practices down into England because they think it'd be such a tumultuous time staying in Scotland that they just don't want to risk it. And other businesses as well may move away from Scotland because of financial turbulence, and Scotland's tax rate may change, corporate tax rate, although Alex Salmond has said that he would really lower down the corporate tax rate in Scotland to try and make it competitive. Other things is that Scottish military, they currently they'd have about 20,000 troops in total, they reckon. However, currently the United Kingdom's nuclear arsenal, kind of our Trident system, which is our nuclear submarines, is based in Scottish ports. And so if Scotland became independent, England would then have to house our Trident system. And Scotland and Alex Salmond has admitted that if they happen to kind of put up their own independent army, as it were, they would have to buy a whole host of new battleships and probably some aircraft. They may have to build a new kind of military airport to house all these places. It's a large cost to Scotland as well. Now, the pluses to Scotland are that is that they'll have complete financial independence. They'll be able to do what they want. They can set their welfare amount. They can charge however much they want for university. Currently, at the moment, all Scottish universities are completely free. Their healthcare system, once they'll have the National Health Service. Here in the UK or in England, you do have to pay for kind of certain drugs and stuff. In Scotland, all the elderly get all of their prescription drugs for free, so that's something that Scotland's going to have to fork up with. But the thing is, with financial independence, they'll also have control of the oil fields up in the north, and there is a lot of money to be made that's kind of waiting underground for Scotland there. Estimates vary of how much oil is there. They say kind of if you average it out, it's about 40 years worth of oil, and I kind of feel that will keep Scotland financially afloat for 40 years, and then they may come crying back to the UK. Overall, many people think that it's in Scotland's interest to vote for independence if they want to be completely independent. However, this isn't just a black or white yes/no vote. There are a number of options to the Scottish government should they wish to take them. Currently, the SNP and Alex Salmond just want to say, nope, complete independence. We want to run our own country. There's 4 options open to them. There's voting no and keeping the absolute status quo. There's voting yes and having complete independence. And there's 2 things called Devo Plus and Devo Max. And Devo Plus is essentially they will still remain within the Union, they'll still remain part of the United Kingdom, but they'll get a bit more have allowed certain more powers of changing certain policies that will only affect Scotland. So certain powers will be devolved from Westminster in England and go up to Scotland. That's Devo Plus. And then Devo Max, so Devolution Max, it means they'd have complete financial control. They'd essentially have financial independence, but they would remain within the Union. And that's something that I would probably personally prefer that they went for. I don't necessarily want Scotland to leave. If I were able to vote, I'd vote no for Scottish independence, just because Alex Salmond as a politician is not a particularly likeable man, I find, and I'd like to see him crying when he loses. And people may be asking, oh, surely they can just vote again in a year's time. It's kind of become an agreement that this is a once-in-a-generation type of vote, so if Scotland votes no, this question isn't going to be asked for another 40, 50 years. And just one other final thing to kind of clarify in terms of facts is that people are thinking, oh, why is this being voted in now, or why is the vote happening now? There's a large number of issues, predominantly because it's in between, it's kind of not within the main political cycle in terms of Westminster politics, and also because the UK is going to be having a national election in 2015, they want to try and get things done before then. That does leave some problems in that what if Scotland were to vote yes, then they would then have kind of agreement talks with politicians in Westminster as to kind of how people proceed, the amount of debt that they would have. But that agreement would have to be reached before the 2015 election, which would be sometime in May. The problem with that is Alex Salmond could potentially be coming up with an agreement with David Cameron, the current kind of Prime Minister of the country. However, odds are David Cameron probably won't be Prime Minister after the national election, and so the new government would have to abide by an agreement made by the previous government, and that can be a problem. But everything is being rushed through rather quickly just to try and get it through the national election. But as I said, September 18th is when Scotland is going to vote, and the results will probably be in sometime by September 19th morning. It's an exceptionally close one to call. Not many people, not many professionals are putting money on it. If I were, I would say no. But yeah, that's the Scottish independence, and I just thought I'd give a bit more, at least a tiny bit more depth. It may be a bit uninformed, as I said. I'm not an expert on British and Scottish politics. Like Jenk didn't give enough out there, but there we go. All right, Sean?
Me, yes. Quiet, Nick. Yeah.
Damn it, Sean.
When are you ever going to learn, Stephen, saying no to independence does not work out for you? I say Scots should be ruled by Scots. Freedom for all. Forget the UK. Like, bounce out of there immediately. You got 1 week to decide. Everybody knows independence is better. You even borrow our Declaration of Independence. The English are terrible. Like, let's keep it real. There's not one redeeming quality about them. They think they
You
own
are so
everything.
hilariously full of shit. It's not even funny.
They think they own everything. Steven, it's
They did once.
2014, and you're still saying that you would vote no for their independence? How elitist of you. So yeah, if I'm a Scot, I'm getting my kilt, I'm putting on my war paint, I'm playing that damn Mel Gibson movie, and I'm voting
You would
for
be immediately
freedom.
branded as not a Scot because that's not what a Scot looks like or wears. That's never what they looked like or wore. So
Okay,
they would
first of
be
all-
like, "You, that's
first of all,
ridiculous."
nobody asked for a history lesson. I asked for a freedom lesson, and that movie's about freedom. So yeah, the Scots should be independent. Northern Ireland should be independent. Anything that England thinks it owns should be independent.
Northern Ireland doesn't want to be independent. It's voted repeatedly to stay in. That's why it's
It
there.
don't matter. And Belgium, I think it's Belgium or Brussels that's threatening to not let it's Brussels probably to let them not let them in the European Union. Good. The Scottish don't want to be in the European Union. They want to be free. Freedom, number one, independence.
This is essentially like kind of the Texas secession argument. I mean, currently in the UK, down in Cornwall, for those that don't know, that's kind of the southwest kind of leg of the country. There's been an independence movement in Cornwall for
The
decades.
Cornish are raising arms over this too, eh?
Yeah, precisely. The Cornish, as I think Cenk mentioned on the main program, there's a lot of worry in other European countries, and similarly in the UK as well. Kind of the Cornish independence movement will get a boost if Scotland vote yes. The Catalonian movement in Spain will get a boost. There's some segments in southern France that will get a boost. All across Europe.
I'm in favor of all of them. Freedom.
No. Sean, no. I'm against. I don't like the idea of the Scottish independence, in part because I'm a territorialist. I like the way the UK looks all pretty and united under one sort of flag. I like the idea of granting them more autonomy within the Union. I think that's great. That's an excellent idea. I just don't like the idea of them becoming a separate entity, in part because I don't want to call it England again. Sean, shut up with the freedom stuff in the chat. But no, Stephen's absolutely right. We don't get it here in North America. Our countries are young. Our countries have been relatively held together. A lot of these European countries have fought wars tooth and nail to stay together. And there's a lot of bubbling animosity still underneath the surface there. And I don't like the idea of them being allowed to just immediately jump free if they want to. I think that's a step backwards. Because I don't think that promotes cooperation and unity. I think that promotes, in a sense, a form of tribalism. Now, Scotland's a very different example because, for the most part, a lot of their affairs are handled outside the region. I think I'm all in favor of that changing. But there's a lot of other places. Frickin' France has a couple places that have a very long streak. Alsace-Lorraine, for example, is one that's historically unsure about it, whether or not it's German or if it's French. You have parts of Germany, frickin' Bavaria and Munich. I would not surprise me at all if they want to, if there's thoughts of them becoming separate. I mean, there's a lot of stuff under the surface of European politics, and there's a lot of different older nations, sub-nations within them. And it's a very tricky balancing act. How do you prioritize who gets to leave, and what are the implications for the rest?
Yeah, it's a very. Just before I bring Julie in, I'll go to you next. But England used to own part of France. We used to own Normandy. Kind of a number of centuries ago. It's a very difficult issue, and I feel like a number of the Scottish they're just voting because there's this sort of. I'm sure there's probably you have it within America, kind of certain kind of state rivalries. Kind of Alabama wants to out stupid Mississippi, and there's always been certainly kind of. I mean, sports is when it comes out the most. When English play the Scottish at rugby or at football, it's like, oh well, we hate them because we hate them, sort of thing that we get from the Scottish, and similarly with the English. And I just really hope that people don't vote on that sort of emotion-based reading. I know people do tend to vote on emotions. That's a stupid thing to do. But I hope they actually look at the policy, look at the numbers. And I think the most important thing is whether it's financially available. So just before I go to you, Julie, I just want to throw in another question to you as well. You make your comment and then answer this. Do you think it's a good idea that they've allowed kind of 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in something as important as a country's independence?
As far as the question about age goes, I think it really depends. I'm not sure. it almost seems like you should have some sort of test to be able to vote. It seems like, in a way, in a situation like this. My son is very, very well informed politically. He's 18 years old. He has been since he was 13, 14. Of course, his views have evolved over the course of time. So it's really hard for me to say it. Yes, 16 is, it may be for some youth too young to vote on something of this magnitude. However, it may be something that is very pertinent to them at this point, because this is the world that they are growing up in. I was just kind of curious as to how would it destabilize Europe? As an American and as Americans, I'm sure we have not really seen this as being an issue at the forefront. And so this has probably been something going on for quite some time. For us, it's just been the last few weeks that we've heard of it. How long has this been going on, as the discussion, so to speak?
I mean, the whole discussion of Scottish independence has been going on since like 1707, when Scotland first joined the Union. But it's really only been, I would probably argue, from about 2002, from about then, certainly kind of turn of the millennium, when there was a certain rise in minor parties. So you had the Green Party, you had kind of UKIP start to get at least a tiny bits of name recognition, and then in Scotland you had the Scottish National Party. And then kind of election after election, the Scottish National Party got more and more seats in Scotland. So in just kind of to explain it maybe a bit more, every single kind of county and seat in England has a seat within Westminster, and then in Scotland they also have each kind of individual county, they vote kind of Labour, Liberal Democrat, Scottish National Party, UKIP if they wanted to. Monster Raving Loony Party is one that we had up there as well. At least someone who was running, they didn't win. But then those people would send their politicians down to Westminster. And one of the contentions that Scottish people have, certainly people in the Yes campaign, is that there's people within, kind of people who've been voted in London, kind of borough councils. They're making decisions that are affecting Scotland. And the Scottish people just want their Scottish politicians to affect their policies. And that's one issue, that they just want some more political freedom. That's why I go for more of the devolution max approach. In regards to the kind of, is it destabilizing Europe in any way? I don't think it's going to have as big an effect as some media outlets are saying. I think it's going to give certain independence movements in other countries a bit more of a jab. But the thing is that since kind of the euro was formed, there's this whole idea when that started that kind of Europe will come together and it'll just be one big entity, and that's kind of all really nice and it'll be all lovely and be like America's a superpower, China's a superpower, and you just have this Europia as a superpower. And it turned out that whilst that worked well for a number of years, then it started to falling apart because not all countries are equal. You saw kind of Italy and Greece get into problems, and Portugal and Ireland as well. And I think people are saying, well, maybe we should, when Greece went into huge financial trouble, we're saying, well, maybe we should kick Greece out of Europe because they're just a huge economic burden on kind of the European Union and the European currency. And so if Scotland then kind of goes independent and say, well, kind of that country can live on its own within the geographical kind of scope of Europe, that can be independent, and Norway and kind of the Scandinavian countries, they can be independent. So I think people may have a slight fear that in people's minds think, oh, well, maybe Europe isn't such a good idea. Maybe we should kind of fragment and go back to kind of the Germans using their own currency, the French using francs, and so on. And I think that's maybe one of the worries that people have about Scottish independence. But to be honest, Scotland isn't the biggest, well, it's not a country yet, but it's not big enough to cause large enough ripples for that to happen. But it will certainly get people thinking about that sort of idea. Sean, do you want to go in?
Yeah, I got this. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of earth the separate and equal station which laws and nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these
Jeff
are
is
life,
face palming a
liberty,
bit.
and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
And
that
men
whenever
disagree.
any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles, organizing its powers in such a form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence.
In what universe is the United? Is the British government destructive to Scotland?
Not be changed for light of transient causes, semicolon. And accordingly, all experience hath shewn
You're just being
that mankind are more disposed to suffer.
Someone get him. He's just reading to be a dick.
Sufferable than the right to themselves, abolishing these forms. I'm reading this whole Independence, just so you know.
Shut it off! Shut him off, Jeff. He's just gonna read the whole thing.
While evils are sufferable,
You know, this is why we can't have
and
nice
to
feelings.
right themselves by
Just
abolishing
mute
the
him.
forms.
Mute him. I want to talk.
Wait, I lost my place. Hold on.
Good.
Object evinces and design to reduce them under absolute disposition.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Finally.
There we go.
So this would be one thing if they were denying you like rights and actual opportunities to change. But
Yeah.
what baffles me the most is in what universe is the British Parliament destructive to the existence of the Scottish people? In what universe is that the case?
There will be some people that say the policies enacted in Westminster, whilst they may benefit those in the south, they're not kind of benefiting those in the north. You know,
But it's not. Are they harming those in the north? Are they actively harming the north? Are they actively restricting Scottish rights?
They're not. I think there may be a case to be made that certain things, such as, for example, there's something that recently got repealed, but it's called a bedroom tax. Whereas if you had an extra bedroom in your house that wasn't being used, you'd get taxed. I can't remember it exactly, but that
That's
kind of necessarily
taxes,
hurt.
man.
Yeah, that necessarily hurt kind of poorer families more, and the Scottish and those up north tend to be less well off than those in the south, and so it could be seen to negatively harm them because they'd have less money to spend on, you know, decent food. So there's some sort of case. I think one interesting thing, just completely moving away from Sean, but talking about independence and kind of having a constitution, and Jenk thought it'd be kind of a nice idea that if Scotland voted for independence, and it would be an opportunity to see a Western country. I mean, okay, we've seen countries like Iraq and stuff try to form its own constitution, but that's kind of fallen by the wayside for the large part because it's such a chaotic region. But obviously Scotland isn't in a civil war or anything like that, so it would be interesting to see what sort of constitution they would write. Problem is, I think for the most part they'd copy pretty much all of the UK laws. They'd maybe change a few ones that kind of are stupid anyway, and that kind of English law system needs to get round to changing or completely getting rid of. The only thing that Scotland really wants is just financial independence and be able to kind of decide how much they spend on education, how much they spend on the military, kind of certain tax rates and things like that. It really is just a financial and economic argument kind of behind the whole independence. There's not that much else to it. And from the numbers, the problem is people can kind of fiddle with numbers any way they want. For the most part, it seems like it could work in Scotland's favour for a while, assuming that the North Sea oil reserves are there. But once those run dry, Scotland's really going to be in a world of hurt, I think, because they're not going to have any real, you know, I know Jenk likes to say he loves to go to Scotland on holiday, but there's really not a lot there. And the rainfall, I mean, one interesting bonus that will happen if England and Scotland do separate is that the average rainfall in the United Kingdom, if Scotland went separate, the average rainfall across the country would drop by 10 centimetres every year because Scotland gets so much rain. So that would be a slight positive, and also our life expectancy would go up if Scotland went independent.
On paper, we're not talking in actual fact. We're just talking on paper. obviously, which is, I guess, if we're gonna go by on paper pluses, okay. But this is why I actually kind of didn't like the idea of even Yugoslavia falling apart. And granted, that's a very different situation because they fell apart and started butchering each other. But I can't get over the fact. I think things like that are a step backwards. I thought that about the whole Yugoslavia thing falling apart. I thought the best thing for them was to try and work out the differences and stay unified in a country, because other than certain things, they're the same damn people. They're, ethnically speaking, of course, not. There are obviously some differences, language differences, at least in written language there's some differences. Sean, fuck off. But no, I thought it had a lot of promise if it had been done right. It wasn't. The Serbs were arguably at the start a little more dominant, but I can't get around that fact. I cannot get around that fact that I think people separating on old hatreds or cultural differences is just not the wisest thing to do, unless they're actively murdering each other. In that case, yeah, it's just then that unity has been forced and it needs to be repealed back. But Scotland and England have been under the same banner for how long? Oh, like 700 years.
Yeah, can I just address
300 years we've been joined together. That's when the last kind of pact was formed.
Okay.
I just want to address Nick's point. Yugoslavia, remember Czechoslovakia?
Czechoslovakia?
Thank you. Remember, Czech Republic did awesome after they separated. You want to know another country that did awesome after they separated? It's called America. So you know what? Independence, and honestly, like in all seriousness, if the Scots want to have self-governance, and they want to have a bigger say in their own lives, like all those issues that Stephen brought up are real. What happens to the nuclear arsenal? What happens to the oil fields? What happens to national debt? That's all nice, but the Scots should have their chance to make laws for themselves. Like they should, if they want independence, they should have it. And
of course.
I'm not biased at all by my hatred of the United Kingdom and the royal family and the crown and Stephen and everything English. I just want, in all seriousness, if self-determination is the principle that I think all of us stand by, we all believe in republic or democracy or something based on self-determination. So if the Scots want freedom, I say they should take it from Stephen by force.
That's where I would cross. Where I get where you're joking, but
well, yeah, I mean,
no one's saying they shouldn't. If they want freedom, no one's saying they shouldn't have it. I'm just saying I don't think it's the right option. I think it's always to me perceived a step backwards.
Yeah, I mean, people are saying kind of obviously freedom is the best way to go. More freedom is a good thing, and it depends how you set out the boundaries of that freedom. I know that's a funny phrase to use, but that's why I really do think that the devolution max is the best thing, because it will give Scotland kind of complete control over how it runs its own affairs, whilst it will also allow Scotland to have the same sort of clout that it currently has on the international stage. Were it to go separate, Alex Salmond saying, "Oh no, we'll still be treated kind of just as powerfully, you know, a proud nation of Scots and stuff." The thing is, it would just be ignored. It would be seen like kind of a client state of the UK, and it just simply, it would also negatively impact England as well. I know kind of Cenk, I think it was more of a throwaway comment, but he said, you know, people have been saying it may be kicked off the Security Council at the UN if Scotland went independent, because there'd be the argument that England is no longer that much of an economic superpower. That's not the case, and I don't think that would happen. But certainly in terms of kind of economic trade agreements, kind of just other kind of peace treaties and things like that, it would mean that both countries, were they separate, they wouldn't have as much world presence as they would together. So if they stayed within the Union, but just if we, the English, gave kind of the Scottish Parliament its own powers. I mean, currently in Wales, they have a devolution house, so they can choose how much they spend in the NHS. They can reallocate resources in kind of for education and things like that. And while Scotland already does have a number of those powers, they just want a couple more of those powers. And I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. If they run their own affairs, then that's fine. I mean, for example, somebody made a point a while ago that we had kind of the Royal Bank of Scotland had to be bailed out, and because it was part of the United Kingdom, we could afford just to bail it out. Whereas if Scotland were independent, they would have been hit. It would have been worse than kind of Greece's situation if they had to bail out the Royal Bank of Scotland. And I think also I just want to address a point that was raised in the comments by Some Say Doubting Tom, about the north-south divide in England and whether like a kind of the Confederacy, that sort of thing. In England, there is a sort of cultural idea that there is a distinct divide between the north and the south. Kind of the north is kind of sort of grim up north. It's kind of a bit hard. They're all hard cases, and it's all they're a bit poorer up there. And it's more miserable in the south. They're more affluent. They're more posh, and all of those things. And I think there is definitely a cultural north-south divide, and I think there is also an economic one, and that's something that can't be swept away. But I think that it's not as bad as people make out it to be, and so I just wanted to address that. Yes, there is England certainly isn't just one nation, all exactly the same. Whilst we're a small island, there is a distinct difference between the north and south of the country. Jeff, did you have anything to say? Because I'm pretty much done now.
No. I think I think you guys covered it pretty well.
Jeff, pick a side. Before you sign off, you have to pick a side.
I think I have something to say too on this.
All right, but let Jeff pick a side first, so we have him on record.
I'm not taking a side. I don't have enough information on this, and to be honest, foreign policy like this is not like foreign affairs like this. Not my strong suit. I spend too much time being Amerocentric.
Steven, I have a question for you. It's been a while since I checked, so I do kind of forget.
All right. Before you ask that question, Nick,
sure.
Let's wrap this up. Get this wrapped up soon, and do the rest of the time. Unless anybody has a quick story they want to present, go and do some Q&A for the next 20 minutes, and then we'll wrap the show.
Okay. Steven, my question was just, I think there's also no doubt that the immigration to the British Isles, most of it has been in the south, in the metropolitan London area and the surrounding countryside around there. So you have a lot more multiculturalism there, and ethnic and racial differences there too. Do you think it's at all possible that Scotland might not want any part of that? I don't know. I don't remember. I remember this was talked about a couple months ago on a course, but
for Scotland, I don't think immigration is as high a priority as it certainly is in England. I mean, you're right. Most of the immigration does come through they come through either Eastern Europe or through Africa, and then they come up through France, and then they cross on the lorries either kind of by ferry or kind of on the lorries in the underground tunnel. It is, you're right, mainly in kind of the London on the south coast. Birmingham, Bristol, that's probably about as far north as the major kind of minority communities are.
Not York? I thought York might have some that are fairly large.
There certainly are clusters up north in York, in Newcastle, but it is more of a, I don't want to use the word problem, because that makes it sound like immigration is a bad thing.
But it's more of a challenge, difficulty. Uh-oh, Steven's connection, I think, is cut out. Uh-oh.
All right, if that is the case...
we broke Steven.
If his connection cut out, that's probably the forces of freedom. But I have a question. I have a question for Nick. We tend to agree that Iraq is a fiction, right? It's three different groups that are bound together by a border drawn by somebody else, England, and that will naturally divide. So is not the Scottish English under the UK banner also
it's very different?
That will eventually separate. Eventually, the Scots will want independence. Why not now?
See, that I kind of disagree on, in part. The part where I disagree on is I think you're going to reach the point where what Stephen was alluding to with the purpose of the European Union will eventually happen. I do think you might eventually see Europa become an actual thing. And at that point, I guess technically you could see Scotland becoming a state within Europa rather than under the thumb of Britain. And in that case, sure. I think the problem, what I take issue with is the sense of disconnect and wanting to leave a greater union along nationalistic-ish lines. That's what troubles me. When for the most part, their relations have been relatively positive, not really marked by any serious strife in recent years. They've been all pretty good. There's no major religious tension, unlike in Iraq. There's no major linguistic and cultural barriers. They all sort of speak English, just different, I guess, subvariants of the language. So it's not like Iraq in that sense. It's not, you don't have very different cultures and religions just colliding in an artificial barrier in recent years. You have at least 300 years of unity and a lot of interaction and connection before then too. So I just don't think it's the right thing to do. I think if Scotland wants more autonomy within the Union, that's awesome. Awesome for that. Totally happy to endorse that, because that's fine. If their affairs are different, they're geographically different, there are some slight cultural differences, and so they should have the right to govern their own affairs, and they still have the right to declare independence. I just don't think it's the right idea.
All right, that's a fair point from an outsider perspective. Steven's computer crashed, is he told me. No, we're both outsiders. I don't mean that to be dismissive. Steven's computer crashed, so I'm assuming the side of freedom really did win, and Scottish hackers took it to him. But yeah, I don't believe that the Europa dream is going to work. I think it's failing right now. Like Greece, all these countries can't coexist with the same currency as Germany and all these other richer countries. So
it's keep in mind it's failing now in part because it's still the period of peace and relative stability in Europe that we've seen is very, very new, historically speaking. It's not like Britain where it was united for 300 years and there was not really any trouble. Europe has been divided and torn apart by war almost consistently for those very same 300 years. There's a lot of time for a lot of hatreds that need to die. A lot of things need to cool off.
And they exist, remember, as a defense mechanism against the Soviets, which don't exist. So, even though the European Union was an official thing, those alliances built after World War II, which Soviets aren't around, although the Russians are acting up again. But regardless, I know it's weird, but regardless,
the Russians will always be a fear. The Russians have always been a fear in European affairs. They were a fear in the 19th century as well. The biggest fear of Britain was to keep them out of the Mediterranean Sea. They didn't want Russian influence there. Russia will always be a problem for European politics. Always.
Right.
I don't think that's going to go away. It's not necessarily against anything. It's not necessarily against the Russians. It's not that they're bad people. I just think there's a lot of concern about Russian influence involved in European trade that Europe is going to take a long time to get over. So I think that's still present now. I think there's a good chance it will be for quite some time. It's just the nature of the beast, quote unquote, if you will, is evolving and changing. And I think eventually we'll see a Europa united. It'll be a long time coming. It's not even close now. But I think we might eventually.
There is a Europa, actually. It's a moon.
Fuck off, Jeff.
I'm just saying. I'm not saying anything.
Gotta be all technical like that, damn it.
If you guys want to move to Europa, you better build a pretty big spaceship. I'm just saying.
That's true. Anyway. I have a very non-substantive point. I said that hold on. I did say if the Scots want their independence, they should take it from Stephen, and his computer literally crashed minutes later.
You see, Sean, when the Scots heard they want their free, they can take it from Stephen. They thought you meant his computer.
All right. Anyway, we do have one question so far, and it's from Lucy. She asks, "We know that more and more." We know that more and more youth lean atheist. Do you see that playing a major role in the 2016 elections? More youth also support Palestine. Do you also think that will affect the votes?
Yes.
No.
Julie first, though.
Julie,
yeah.
Well, speaking as someone who has two youth, my daughter's 24, my son's 18. They have both. They were brought up in Christian school. I gave them a Christian background, but I also gave them choice to be whatever they wanted to be and we talked different religions, we talked different cultures and stuff like that as they were growing up. So they had a really good base, and they are both atheists now. But as a result, they see the world in a completely different view than what I grew up with. For example, the way they see the Palestine situation is different than the way I was raised. Although I do believe that Palestine should be free, I definitely think that as these youth are getting old enough to vote, it's going to make a dramatic difference because they see it a lot differently. In some ways, they see it more clearer, and in some ways they see it a little more foggy. But it's interesting listening to their views and seeing how they react to the way things are going on in America and across the world.
I'm gonna I hate to say this after she presented such a well thought out argument, but for 2016 I'm gonna say definitely no, because there's not gonna be a pro-Palestinian presidential candidate. That doesn't exist in American politics right now. As for other issues, just generally who will get elected, will atheists have more of an impact? As the population of atheists grow, of course they'll have more of an impact. But on the Palestinian issue that soon, I'm sorry, I just don't. Not in 2016. Trust me, Hillary Clinton and Republican opponents are not going to be pro-Palestine.
I'll take Sean's perspective on this one as well. Definitely no pro-Palestine yet. At least not for a while. I think the fact that Palestine is now going to talk directly with, or the Hamas is now going to talk directly with Israel is a good step. And we probably will see some, well, you know what? There is a scenario where we could see people come out in defense of Palestine. But that situation would be when Hamas says, okay, Israel has a right to exist, now can we talk about our right to exist? That, I think, is when you're going to see a pro-Palestine movement rise in American politics, but only in that situation. And that's the only context I could ever see that being the case. As for atheists, oh, hell yes, hell damn right they're going to be more involved in American politics. We're probably not going to see an atheistic president for a long time, but of course they're going to be more involved. Why do you think Fox reacts the way it does every time we talk about other religions and the Festivus poll and stuff? Because they see the goddamn writing on the wall. They see it's coming. It's not just that it's Muslims. It's that it's secularists and people who don't really have a particular faith and don't think faith belongs out in public, pushing back against what was very much a conservative religious movement from the 1950s and 60s. Basically, what Canada and Britain went through in the 19th and early 20th century, America went through in the 1950s and 60s, where you put the God in God we trust on your damn money, and you put God into the Pledge of Allegiance. That was what we went through way back in the turn of the century. So, welcome to the party, America. Good to see you're finally joining us in dealing with social Christianity and Christian movements within that sphere of the world and of your politics. But yes, they see the writing on the wall. It's the pushback has come. They're being forced back, and they're trying tooth and nail, especially with their money and their judges that they bought now, to try and make progress on it and basically try and convince everyone that God should be there. So, but the people aren't buying, and they know it. So it's just a matter of time. Stephen, what do you think about that question?
I didn't catch all of it, and if people were wondering, yes, the Scottish cut power to my house. No, in terms of there being an atheist president, it's not going to happen until kind of people like myself, kind of people who are in their early 20s, when we're in our 60s and 70s, when our generation has become the presidential candidate sort of age, when there's a chance to be an atheist, and those people, will then be running. I think that's really the only chance. I'd find it unlikely that there'll be an atheist president in my lifetime. I mean, Obama's probably secretly an atheist. I doubt he actually believes, at least not to the full extent that he does in Christianity. He's probably more deist. But I don't think there's going to be an outwardly kind of pro-atheist, kind of unashamed atheist within my lifetime. I hope that's not the case, but I think it'll just take a little bit longer than my existence for it to happen, which is sad, but that's what I think anyway.
All right. Quick answer for me on the pro-Palestinian. No, we're not going to see anything like that, especially 2016. Everybody's really they're really firmly shoved up Israel's ass on pretty much every matter, no matter how right-wing Israel's government gets, but we can get into that later. Atheists, I still don't think that's going to have a discernible effect because despite the fact of religiosity as a percentage growing in America, we still don't have people identifying as atheist. And there are differing reasons for that. People not wanting to identify with the distrust of atheists in general. So while you'll see people continue to identify or not identify with any religion, you're also not going to have people identifying with atheists because of the way that it's been demonized in the past few years. So as far as 2016 goes in the elections, no, we're not going to see any major pushes, I think, or major effect from atheists towards atheist candidate. Remember, we don't have a basis for atheists to run for office because in a lot of states they're barred from office. And so, there's the things that have to be sorted through before we can even see a discernible impact from a larger non-religious base. So those are my answers to that question. We've got a couple more questions from the audience. We got one from Jamie, who asks, even if the United States wins the battle against ISIS, they'd lose the war. Now, this is more of a statement. That is, unless they commit genocide to ISIS members. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily using the word genocide. It's a very muddy
term.
Yeah, it's a very kind of like muddy lexical ground that you're getting in when you start. I mean, you are technically wiping out a group of people that share a same mindset and stuff, but it's not. Let's say if
it's not genocide.
No.
I've took a course this year about it. Genocide is defined as the extermination in whole or in part of a group defined on racial, ethnic grounds and things like that. Political grounds is not one of them. I think religious grounds is one, but ISIS I don't think is quite a religious group. It's not trying to exterminate a faith. It's a subset. So while it's terrible, and if you want to call it like ethnic cleansing, that's yes, that is something that we could say. But genocide is a different term. So I think we should clarify that.
It's kind of a fallacious question.
No, I got it.
Because let me make the point, Sean, then we'll throw to you. It's a fallacious question because it presupposes that a war against terror is winnable. It is not. You can't win against terror, especially by inflicting more terror.
Sure,
you know what I mean? Because what do you think we're doing?
You just need to follow.
No. Bombing creates more terrorists.
Yeah, but no, Jeff, you don't understand. You just have to kill every single ISIS member, every single member of ISIS's family and friends, who might get mad that you killed their family, and then you have to kill everybody who will feel sympathetic that you're wiping out this entire group of people, including innocent people, to the cause. And like after, I don't know, like maybe 300, maybe 400 million people, then maybe you might defeat ISIS and ISIS sympathizers and people who are like, hey, that's wrong that you're murdering all these hundreds of millions of people and all that. So you just gotta eliminate maybe like moral people in the entire world. Like you gotta get the bad people in ISIS and everybody who has feelings about mass slaughter. So you just get rid of all of them and we'll be good. Safe. Free.
Here's what we need to do. We just need to burn as many fossil fuels as we can as soon as we can. Like right now, go outside, turn on your car. You don't have to go anywhere. Just turn on your car, turn on your stove, turn on all the electronics in your house. Burn, baby, burn through all that fossil fuels, and then we won't have to worry about ISIS. Then we won't fucking have to worry about anything. Because we'll have just fucking destroyed ourselves.
One of the best quotes I heard about kind of the whole notion of war on terror is that you can't, Sean's right, you can't defeat terrorism because terrorism is not a thing, it's a mode of warfare. You can't defeat a mode of warfare. It's not an actual group. ISIS is a terrorist group, but they use terrorism as a mode of warfare. It's like guerrilla tactics. You can't defeat kind of guerrillaism as a mode of warfare. It just doesn't make any sense. So declaring a war on terror is completely and utterly asinine. You have to declare a war on a certain group or country or faction, and whilst America does seem to have done that, they should stop calling it a war on terror because it's a completely stupid phrase.
But that's what I'm saying. You have to kill every single person who feels disenfranchised, who might use violence for political means against the state. That's not hard at all.
All right, Julie.
I'm back to being a firm believer that the more we do, the more we involve ourselves in situations like this, the worse it's going to get, because we are disenfranchising people and they are going to start fighting back against us. America is not seen as a happy group of people across the world, and we need to stop believing that we are the ones who are loved by everyone, because people don't love us. We are bullies. We are big, huge bullies across the world scene.
All right. 2 more questions. Let's keep them quick. That's why I saved them to the end, because they're quick questions.
Chest tattoos.
Flintstoning Tom asks, would you support a global referendum for an international government? One world government, Illuminati style. No, he's not actually saying Illuminati style. I added that. But no, at this point, we're not mature enough to play with each other.
The answer is no, because if China and India vote for world government, everybody else is screwed. Why would I want to be attached to a global referendum? That's the most ridiculous thing ever. Here's what we should have a referendum for. If we can all leave England right now and just wipe it off the map.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
God, for fuck's sake.
Rename it Suckville.
Okay, you're being exceedingly racist towards the English there. But in terms of a one world government, the idea is right, and it's something that humanity should try to go towards. I think the physicist Michio Kaku, you have different types of civilization. You have kind of level 1, 2, 3. In fact, that's it. And you have kind of a global civilization. Then you have a, I forgot what it is, like a solar system based civilization, I believe. And then you have a galactic civilization. And currently we're not even at level 1 because we don't have a kind of a single. We're not in control of our entire planet. We have different factions, different countries warring against each other. We don't agree on anything. And I think it would be nice to have this sort of perfect kind of world government, and you'd have this sort of thing where you'd have the main base, but then you'd have devolution of powers to different geographic regions because they all have their individual needs and stuff. That sort of system, I'd like it, and it's a complete utopia idea, and it's not going to happen in my lifetime or my kids' lifetime or probably my grandkids' lifetime, and by then we would have destroyed the planet anyway because of climate change. So I just don't think it's going to happen. I'd like it to, in kind of an idealized sort of version in my mind, but it's just.
Well, I know where Tom's coming from. He's looking at if we had a Star Trek utopian society.
Yeah, right? I got that too. He's eventually we would. Eventually that would happen, I think.
If we don't destroy ourselves first, because once again, that's one of the major kind of plot lines in Trek history is the fact that we went through all this turmoil, World War III, destroying the planet, and then boom, first contact, and then we learned, hey, maybe we should get along with each other because there are fucking aliens out there.
Yeah, let's get along with each other, but fuck those guys.
Well, that is what happened in the mirror timeline anyway. Fuck those guys.
Yeah.
We're gonna take their ships and be an empire. Fuck yeah, America.
But Yeah, I'm with you. We're not there yet. Not even close. I don't even know if we will. At least not with the current systems.
All right.
I'm not as doom and gloom about the climate change thing. I mean, I think humanity, for the most part, will survive. It'll be apocalyptic, basically, but we'll endure.
We can't keep corruption out of our local governments. There's no way I want a gigantic world government. Sorry, not interested.
All right. Last question. This one we'll keep it short. Lucy asks, chest tattoos on women, good or bad?
Bad.
Not my cup of tea, but God bless. If you want to get a chest tattoo, get a chest tattoo.
Thoughts, Julie?
Yeah, exactly. Not something that I would do. Not something that I would recommend anyone doing. That's kind of a really sensitive area. But if that's what pulls your trigger, then hey, go ahead. That's an individual's right to decide. I don't find it attractive, but you know, it's what you think it is. Do you?
Nicholas?
It can be attractive, but it's also I'm also fairly indifferent about it. It can look nice, but it's not a make or break thing. So like, I don't really care. Do what you want, man, but like, I don't care.
I got this. Look, I'm not into tattoos in general. Like I don't have any tattoos, and I don't like find them normally like super attractive. Chest tattoo, if you want to get it, knock yourself out, go forward. Unlike some people on this panel, I actually believe in freedom.
Funny.
Yeah. Just funny because I think my country's more free than yours, pound for pound at the moment, Sean.
Well, you don't measure.
Look up like the freedom index. I think it's the Kiwis are freer, the most free country, New Zealand, I believe.
Really? Okay.
But to be fair, you don't measure freedom in pounds because that's the currency of bad people.
You're right, nor do we weigh it in pounds. So thank you for correcting me. I stand corrected. Kilo for kilo, I'm pretty sure we have more freedom than you.
Back to the substantive issue, yeah, chest tattoos, they just don't do it for me personally, but go forward and get something nice, creative.
Yeah, they're not a turn off, but it's just
Like I said, it's not my thing. But
right. They won't deter me.
You know what? You're not out there to impress other people. You are not out there to do. You're not doing this for other people. You're doing this for you. And if
you're getting a tattoo to impress others,
something that you really want, and it's something that you feel passionate about, that you really want, it's like a mode of self-expression, then do it.
You know what?
You're not out there to impress anybody else. Fuck everybody else. You want a chest tattoo? Get a chest tattoo.
I have a brilliant idea. All the women out there, send pictures of your chest tattoos to Jeff W.
Don't do it.
Network.com. We need to judge based on the photos, so please send them to Jeff.
You are in trouble. You are asking for a mute, sir.
Or just send them to Sean. Sean's single. He doesn't have any conflicts of interest there. And he's muted, so he can't say no. Get cracking, ladies. The mute tool is a wonderful thing, Jeff.
Oh, I love it. I'm getting a lot of use out of it today. More so than usual. I feel like Sean Hannity right now. Got the power.
Whoa. No. You don't get to feel like Sean Hannity. That's enough. No one should ever feel like Sean Hannity. That is a repulsive feeling. That is just disgusting.
It's kind of dirty, but at the same time, you're like, I just muted you. Yeah.
Dude, just like
What was that? It's sort of like the feeling when you shop at Walmart. You know what I mean? Like if you ever shopped at Walmart, you step in the store, you feel horrible. But you're like, deals.
No, I don't shop at Walmart.
I know. I'm just messing with you guys. All right. Anyway, hey, I'm being Sean for the moment, so I'm allowed to be a douchebag for a couple of minutes. Anyway, guys, that's it for the show. 2 hours. Great show. Thank you for joining us, Julie. Of course, Stephen, Nick, Sean. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Stephen, for presenting a thoughtful segment on Scottish independence until it was derailed by freedom. Kind of ironic. A freedom movement derailed by freedom. What are you going to do? All right, so guys, you know the drill. If you haven't already, subscribe if you found us through the network. Even if you found us through the network, it helps hit the subscribe button because it makes us easier to find for everyone else. And we all want this channel to grow and to be more awesome. So, and we definitely want more panelists. Email me, jeff.w@tytnetwork.com if you want to be on the panel. Facebook me, facebook.com/TYTNation or TYT Community. Follow me on Twitter. Tweet me at JustPolitics, at TYT Community. I run both accounts. So, and if you have questions for next week, hashtag TYT Community. All those plugs. I want to thank you to our patrons. One who is on the panel, Julie, thank you for supporting us and being a part of the TYT community.
It's my pleasure. I definitely think this is something that needs to grow. It's a very good program, and it's a good way to stay in touch with people on the street, so to speak.
Well, thank you, and we really, really appreciate your support and the support of everyone watching out there tonight. Even if you don't, even if you're not a patron or anything, just watching the show, just being around, just chatting, just tweeting us, watching our videos, liking our clips, everything, amazing support, word of mouth, even saying, hey, I know this show or this guy, has this panel of people on and they talk the issues. Just saying like that, spreading word of mouth. That's a lot of support, and we really, really appreciate that. So thank you again, and thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned tomorrow night for the Social Justice Show. We're going to have some great social justice stories. Haven will be back with us tomorrow. Haven with some excellent commentary, so make sure to tune in 8 p.m. Eastern, right after the TYT Live main show. So, yes, Sean does want you to kick his ass. That was my wife, by the way. She saw that little part. My wife, lovely wife, also supports us by watching. Wonderful, wonderful woman. And I hope she does go to New York to kick Sean's ass. We are now currently doing a fundraiser to raise money for tickets to get to New York to kick Sean's ass. Please go to our... Go. Anyway, Social Justice Show tomorrow night, 9 p.m. or 8 p.m. Eastern here on TYT Nation. Tune in. We'll see you there. You guys have a great night. Goodbye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.